Today it is my pleasure to speak with Craig Cooke. Craig, you are a seasoned entrepreneur, a best-selling author, and practitioner of Chinese medical Qigong. You have a remarkable journey spanning from founding a digital marketing agency in the 90s to executive leadership and brand development. Your book, Business Kung Fu, blends martial arts philosophy with business acumen, offering a unique perspective on entrepreneurship. Beyond business, you delve into the realm of energy healing, sharing how Qigong transformed your health and mindset amid the challenges of running your company. Craig, welcome to the show. It's such a pleasure to speak with you today.
Thank you, Agi. Thank you so much for that great introduction. I really like how you articulated everything there in a concise manner too. Yeah, really well done. Thank you.
My pleasure. It means a lot to hear that. Thank you, and I'm very much looking forward, Craig, to this conversation because in many people's minds, entrepreneurship and spiritual elements are not necessarily parts of the same conversation, and that's my intention for today to, combine them and learn from your, unique approach and journey. Before we go there, I would like to start this conversation with asking you to give us some element of your journey. So perhaps your a key defining moment. So take us back to when you started or you got inspired to start learning the Chinese medical Qigong. What was happening there with your business? Take us back there and so we can understand.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, because that was definitely a key defining moment in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So it was around 2014. I started my company in 1996. So had been at it there for, what is that, 18 years or so, in 2014, somewhere around there, right? My math might be off a little bit, but at the time in 2014, we were experiencing rapid growth. We were on what's called the Inc. 5000 list of fastest growing private companies in America. I think that was probably our third year in a row that we were on the list. We had made the list 5 years in a row. So we were like right in the middle of this rapid growth phase. And with that, couple things. One, there's just an enormous amount of stress and pressure from managing your staff, your team, meeting client demands, dealing with vendors, juggling family life, all these responsibilities and obligations, day after day compound over time and create stress. And at the time, I just felt emotionally and mentally out of balance, just off centered. And my health wasn't the greatest either. Like a couple of years prior, I said, I need to get healthier, physically healthier, because when I started my company at age 25, I was in great health. 10 years later, I was on the other side of the spectrum. And that has a cause and effect also. So all these things kind of added up, poor health, stress, pressure, obligations, to where I just wasn't really centered and balanced. And a friend of mine referred me to a gentleman who knew Chinese medical Qigong. So I looked up his website and I said, wow, that's interesting. Because I was familiar with Qigong from my martial arts days, in more martial Qigong and some health and wellness aspects. So I said, well, let me go see if he's the real deal. I'm intrigued. So I went and had an amazing session with him. He was definitely the real deal. And I decided to go back, and I went to see him once a month for about 6 months. His name's Russ Anderson, a great gentleman. And after 6 months, I just found myself much more centered and balanced, just feeling more like my old self in a sense. And at that time, he asked, "Would you like to learn how to do this, how to be a practitioner?" And I said, "Absolutely," because I was just so intrigued, and it helped me so much. I just wanted to keep going. So that was like that key defining moment of that initial meeting Russ in that session. And then 6 months later, making the decision to actually take a much deeper dive and learn. And it really helped me over the years to mitigate stress and all those pressures and to retain that balance. Because all those stresses and pressures don't go away. Life has a funny way of throwing sucker punches at you and punching you in the gut and kicking you in the face and all these things, right? Uh, and it doesn't stop. But with a practice like Qigong, you're just better equipped to manage through it.
Thank you. So, for someone listening now that is not familiar with the Chinese medical Qigong, how would you describe? So, what does it involve?
Sure. So there's three primary branches of Qigong traditionally. There's martial Qigong, medical Qigong, and
Hmm.
spiritual Qigong.
Okay.
So they're all pretty similar. There's just different functions and purposes for various exercises. But if you want to summarize, Qigong is the integration of the mind, body, and breath. And if we actually take a further step back, Qigong literally means energy skill or life force energy skill. Qi is what the Chinese refer to as energy or life force energy, and Gong is skill. So it's really the skill of working with life force energy. And you do that by integrating the mind, body, and breath. And that is done through various exercises that look similar to Tai Chi. A lot of people see what Tai Chi looks like. So it's similar to that without necessarily the martial applications to it. And they're much more simple movements for the most part. And then there's also meditation as well that comes into play, just static meditation, but that could be laying down, sitting, or standing, actually.
I get it. That's you said the skill of working with life force energy, which I understand, and I liked the way you described the integration of body,
Mhm.
mind, and breath. So I will leave the techniques and the practice aside for a moment. I will bring it back. So how did you implement what you learned there in your business? How is I'm trying to figure out what how that would be implemented, shall we say, in the operation of what you were doing.
Sure. So, for myself personally, as I mentioned, it helped me mitigate the stress and pressures, which had benefits in operating the business, just more clarity of mind, um,
Hmm.
being calmer in interactions with people. Because I did find myself getting more triggered, as one could say, where um, just less patience and uh, temper could rise. And that just through that practice, it helped mitigate all that. And again, keeping more centered and balanced personally. Now, with others, I actually uh, taught my management team how to meditate because
Hmm.
they started asking me about. They started noticing, put it that way. They started noticing that I was being more calmer, and then I would say, "Oh yeah, well, that's because I started this thing called qigong." And then sometimes I'd bring it. I'd have a lot of one-on-one meetings with each of the management team members, and sometimes I'd bring it up when I noticed that they had anxiety, for example. People they go through a cycle of all types of different emotions, and I might bring up, why don't you try some meditation? I do this practice called qigong, and it's really great, etc. So there'd just be some conversations, but eventually, I actually
Hmm.
did teach my management team how to meditate, take them through some qigong meditations, which they really appreciated. And I also did a little bit also with once a quarter we would meet the entire company to have like a quarterly update meeting, and there was I know at least once or a couple of times where I took everyone through a meditation as well. because we were just talking about health and wellness and how that's important to help with performance, because it does. It just helps with performance. So there was those group settings, but a lot of one-on-one conversations actually with people and giving them some guidance in that manner with my company, that is.
And Craig, you mentioned earlier that there are three elements or parts to the Chinese Qigong, and you said it is the physical part or the martial arts, which the movements of the body, in other words. So you also mentioned the medical and the spiritual, if I'm correct. So there are two questions that come to mind here. The first one was the physical bit, because you have a background in martial arts since a teenager. So I suppose that was one of the catalysts that drew you to liking and evolving yourself in the practice. Is that something that is, let's say, a necessary part for this path, or was it your path?
Yeah, that's a great question.
I'm asking, Craig, because you mentioned the word meditation quite a few times. So I'm trying to think how, on the one hand, meditation for many people, the idea that comes to mind is someone sitting down with their eyes closed, certainly not doing movements. So guide me through that.
Sure. So for your first question, it's not necessary to go down the martial path with Qigong. Someone could focus on the spiritual or the medical health, like health and wellness and so forth. But it is all connected. They're all interrelated. Absolutely. So with martial arts, that was just my path. That was my first exposure to it. And it's really more what's the function, the purpose of the application of Qigong in that setting. It's to direct energy. So in a martial context, there could be more power generated during combat, right? So, but it's not necessary to go down the Qigong path. It all depends on what someone's looking for. For the medical path, there's aspects of the martial that does actually help, because it's about developing further vibration inside the body, and certain aspects of the martial Qigong does help accentuate and develop that further. The second part of your question with the meditation, yes, there's a couple aspects. So when someone's doing Qigong exercises, even the ones with the movement, you tend to get into a meditative state in a sense, right? Yeah. Even though your body's moving, your eyes could be open, they could be closed also, and the movements are slow, and that's the integration of the mind, body, and breath. The more you settle down and allow yourself to get into a state that is relaxed, we carry so much tension inside ourselves, and being able to relax, and not only the body but the mind. And then as you're breathing and doing these slow, simple movements, and that's what helps too. A lot of the movements are very simple, so you get into a nice meditative state. Not as deep as if you're totally still, but you do get into a meditative state. And then when the Qigong meditations that are, let's call them static, still, there's different ways to go about it, where you're either lying down or you're sitting or you're standing. And when you're standing, for example, there's all kinds of different poses where the hands could be like you're embracing someone or hugging a tree. It's that kind of posture there, or the hands could be down. And there's all these different postures that one could have. And so there is a physical aspect, because you have to hold that, and if you're sitting there after 30 minutes just in holding a posture, it could your mind has to overcome that pain threshold in a sense, but you also have to relax. As the more you relax and let your structure, as long as you have proper structure, you're not having to utilize your muscles as much, actually. And you can get into a really deep meditative state. And that meditation, or those types of meditation with those different postures, serve a very specific purpose, as opposed to maybe a meditation that you're sitting and you're really concentrating on working with certain aspects of your energetic anatomy. It's just like we have a physical anatomy, we also have an energetic anatomy.
Mm. And I wanted to ask also, add a little bit on that, the medical aspect of it. You said that you had some health, physical, you were off balanced, you said, emotionally, mentally, but also physically you were not at your best. So can you share an example of a physical issue that was improved or healed with your practice?
Sure. So a couple of things. Because the health journey is it's been a journey. It wasn't like a one and done thing, right? Because where I found myself like 10 years later after starting my company, I was overweight, not like a lot, but definitely overweight, like too much weight.
Yeah.
Sitting all the time, because doing digital marketing work, sitting at a desk, running a company, sitting, and that's just awful for your body, right? In 2016, so this is a couple of years after I had started Qigong, I did get a blood panel done. It had been the first time I'd been to the doctor in like probably 10 years or so. And I was diagnosed with diabetes, actually. And that was like, wow, that's really a big deal. And then there was all these other things that were issues, like inflammation, high cholesterol, and all these other various factors. There's a whole bunch of issues I had. And my doctor at the time, she did say, because she was familiar with Qigong as a naturopath doctor, and she did tell me that my numbers would have been a lot worse if I hadn't been practicing Qigong, from her knowledge and experience. But the overcoming diabetes, which I have now reversed completely 100%, is multifaceted, where it's not just one thing that takes care of it. It's a number of things. So Qigong is essential because it helps mitigate the stress, because stress is bad for diabetes. Also, other aspects of what it does for the body in and of itself is good. But also proper diet, nutrition, sleep, hydration, activity, walking, and also even strength training. And I did actually get back into martial arts as of a few years ago too. So all these things combined have helped me overcome that. But there was another errant time too when I hurt my knee a few years back, and I'm in a doctorate program for Chinese energy medicine. My first instructor moved to Texas a few years back. And after I sold my company, I had more time available, and I was able to enroll in this doctorate program run by a master that's been at it for 50 years in the space. And during the class, he taught us a meditation that was a standing meditation, actually. And it was actually the first seminar I attended in the program. And it was I think it was called Pulling Out the Pain meditation. And just following that meditation, all the pain in my knee went away. That had been bugging me for at least a year. And just after that, it was gone. It was fine, perfectly fine. So that's an example. There's all kinds of different conditions Qigong can be useful for, especially like chronic conditions. There's a variety of protocols to help treat those.
Sure. Thank you for this answer. And, the topic of health is, we could direct the whole conversation there, because there are so many things to discussed. But with
Yes.
so little time together, I will steer the conversation, and I would like actually to talk about your book and the principles that you share there. So your book, Business Kung Fu, where you merge martial arts philosophy with business principles. So can you tell me first of all what inspired you to write this?
Sure. Well, my first passion in life was books, actually. As soon as I could read, I always had a book in my face, like always,
Mm.
constantly reading. And when I was a teenager, probably around 17 or 18 or so, I just had this desire that one day I would like to write a book. I didn't know on what, but I would. And because I love books so much.
Mhm.
And then come to 2011, 2011, I decided, it's time I start that book. I'd been in my business journey and having success and so forth. And I came up with the idea of just writing the book about my journey of how I incorporated my lessons and principles from martial arts into running the company. So aspects of mindset, discipline, perseverance, even certain models, because like the system I learned was a complete fighting system. So I didn't want the company to depend on just one service offering or one thing. Just we created an integrated system of various
Mhm.
components working in conjunction with each other to bring solutions to the table. So that was highly influenced by what I learned in Chinese Kung Fu. So that's the concept. And there's some other um, aspects of very specific examples that are contained in the book of applying those learnings into a business context.
Talking about this, applying it actually would be what I would like to ask you next. So, share some key lessons or insights coming from your book, so someone listening now, an entrepreneur, can apply to what they do.
Sure. So there's a model I have in there. It's in the first chapter, and people could actually download the first chapter for free on my website if they want to learn more about this. But it's a model I call the 5 elements of entrepreneurship. And this 5 element model is actually modeled after Chinese 5 element theory. Which 5 element theory spans across the Chinese culture from martial arts to medical to spiritual to music to food. It's just an ancient model of balancing the different elements, which are in the Chinese culture fire, earth, water, metal, and wood. And
Mhm.
there's all these various properties, and it's all about having a balance. So, borrowing off that model from my personal experience and through observing others through my personal experience, I identified 5 elements of entrepreneurship, which are passion. That passion leads to discipline. Discipline leads to expertise. Expertise leads to confidence, and confidence leads to faith. So I talked about how that's a cycle, and there's a what's called a generative cycle or creative cycle, that you build the capacity of those elements and fill that capacity. Um, and then but they can also reverse. You can diminish. If your mindset gets challenged and you go the wrong direction, you can be going in the destructive cycle where all these elements, the capacity that you've built and fulfilled, are now getting diminished. And then there's interrelationships between the elements that can have positive or negative impacts. Um, so, for example, confidence. There could be an excess or deficient condition of that element. Let's talk about an excess condition. If there's someone has an excess condition of confidence, what does that manifest as? It normally manifests as arrogance. That arrogance really doesn't serve you well. Confidence serves you well, but when you have an excess and it becomes arrogance, it can create a variety of issues. For example, it has that impact on the earlier element of discipline, because one could think that they're so great because they're arrogant and they're so full of themselves that they don't need to continue working on themselves or evolve, because they just have this arrogance that they're perfect. They're great.
Mm-hmm.
Why do I, if I have that mindset, why do I need to bother with this stuff anymore? I'm just all that, right? So that's an example. So it's all about balancing these elements, building and developing those elements, and then maintaining a balance. And life knocks us out of balance, like we've been discussing. So it's also like, how quickly can you get back to balance and maintain that balance? And you will get knocked out again, but then how quickly can you come back? So that's like one of the principles that I speak about.
Thank you for the principle. Is there any simple practice that the listener can apply just as a first step after this conversation?
Yeah. So, mine, there's in building those different elements, there's a variety of aspects, practices. So it kind of depends on where you're at. Are you passionate about something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you're not, you really need to start exploring life further, be introspective, start thinking like, what is my purpose? Yeah, which I know you talked about a lot, right? Purpose. So that'd be really just sitting down and meditating would be great with that to clear the mind, settle down. Depending upon if you're experienced with meditation, that you can be open to receive information that inspires you, that kind of comes to you during that meditative state. But then also just getting down on a piece of paper and writing down what brings you joy, what activities bring you joy, and what can you do to implement more of that in your life and bring that into some sort of profession. And what value can you create for others and have a purpose? So that's that first element. But then with discipline, that next element, some practical, is just, again, there's a mindset. You got to show up. Having the right mindset, show up every day. And it sounds kind of simple, but it is. It's a lot easier said than done for people. And just, you have to show up every day. But then once you show up every day, it's like, okay, well, let's take my mindset to the next level, right? I need to be productive. Okay, so now you have the battle of showing up down. Well, I need to be actively producing something, rather than just showing up and doing nothing, right? And then, which sounds simple, but again, people have challenges with this. So then the third layer of discipline is really being effective. So once you show up and you're producing, whatever you're producing needs to have value. You need to create value for someone else. So someone needs to really get their mindset wrapped around that and
Mm-hmm.
practice it. And I would say any sort of exercise routine helps with discipline, because you need to engage your body. That's what I like about Qigong. It really engages all aspects of the being. The Chinese refer to the three bodies: the physical body, the energy body, and the spirit body. And when you engage your whole being, you can participate in life much more effectively. So those are a couple of things. I also talked about like problem solving and use the analogy of breaking materials like a brick. And that's one thing I'd work with my employees on and give them that example of that mindset. Because when people get focused on problems and they get so stuck on the problem, they get so spun out and stressed out, and they can't solve the problem because they're just so fixated on the problem itself. I would tell them about the analogy of breaking a brick is you have to focus on where you want to be. So when I learned how to break cement and red bricks and so forth, part of it was conditioning the hands and feet to be able to be in shape enough to take the shock, right, of the material itself. But the other half is in the mind, having total faith in yourself that you can do it. Super important. You have to have that faith in yourself. And then second is where you focus on, where you can't focus on the brick. You have to focus past it, on the other side of it, so that when you have full faith and confidence in yourself, I'd say faith actually, because like in those 5 elements, confidence leads to faith. That's like confidence on steroids, but in a positive way. That that faith helps you get through that brick, and with the focus on the other side, your hand just goes right through it. So the same thing with problem solving. As long as you can focus on where you want to be and you have that faith in yourself that you will get there and you can get it done, maybe not at that moment, but when you walk away and come back, then the problem seems to not be so challenging, and the solutions present themselves. It's just interesting how it works. But that's just another example of what I talk about in the book.
Thank you for emphasizing what you said earlier, to show up every day. Yes, it is simple, but it's not easy. And, one should not underestimate how that simple but not easy act of showing up every day builds a momentum that compounds. So thank you for sharing that. I found that very useful, the way that you describe it.
Thank you.
Craig, I have 2 questions that I always ask my guests at the end of the conversation. Before I do, share with the listener how they can connect with you, find out more. Where do you direct them?
Sure. The 2 primary places are my website, which is c-squaredpro.io. That's the letter C, and then squared spelled out pro.io, c-squaredpro.io. And there's a form on there people could fill out, and I actively monitor that. So I always receive that information. Again, people can download the first chapter of my book for free on my website as well. And then on LinkedIn, I'm very easily found on LinkedIn. Just my user profile is Craig Cooke, and that's Cook with the E at the end. So COOKE. So LinkedIn/in/Craig Cooke. And I monitor that so people can message me, and I actively monitor that all the time. But the book is available on Amazon in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle format. And if people purchase the book, please leave a review. Reviews are awesome and help, as you know.
I know very well.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Craig.
You're welcome.
And let me ask you my last quick questions then. And the first one is, what does personal development mean to you?
That's a great question. Yeah, personal development to me is a continuous journey in where you find yourself getting better every day and in every way possible.
And a hypothetical question, if you could go back in time and meet your 17-year-old self, what's one piece of advice you would give him?
Yeah, that's good. My 17-year-old self. This is, I'm assuming, kind of prior to my discovery of martial arts. I'd probably say start learning kung fu. But I'd probably actually say, don't let yourself be distracted by the various pleasures in life, right? I mean, we have to enjoy life and have pleasures, but when there's too much a pursuit of that, you could get distracted so easily. So I would tell my 17-year-old self, don't let yourself be distracted. Have fun, but don't get distracted. Stay on path.
Thank you. It makes me wonder how many 17-year-old people would actually listen to that advice, because but thank you. Craig, I want to thank you very much for this conversation. I believe it was very useful, and there were some practical elements there for us to take on. I want
Great.
to wish you all the very best with what you do, and continue doing it. I will leave it to you with your parting words for today.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you, Augie, for having me here, and to your audience, thank you for taking the time to listen. I appreciate all of you. And I would recommend people, if they haven't explored aspects of martial arts or Qigong, to go explore that, especially with Qigong. It's great for all different age groups,
Mhm.
and it could really be a game changer for you in your life and just and your overall health and wellness and mental and emotional states. And I just highly advocate, um, go explore and check it out.
Thank you.